All right, it's been a little while since I've hopped on here. We've had rain for about the last 2 or 3 days, so figured I'd use some of this downtime to make a tutorial. And in this one, we're going to be tying this gurgler right here. It is a black and purple color, and it is one that I like to use for redfish, especially on and during the summertime. And we fish a lot of dirtier water, tannic water this time of year, so black and purple always seems to perform pretty well. And yeah, all the materials that I use will be listed in the video description with links on where to buy them. So stay tuned, and I hope you enjoy. Alright, so I'm going to do this one a little different. My light that I was using about halfway through the video had this fan turn on that was extremely loud, and you can't really hear what I'm saying about halfway through the video. So I'm just going to do an audio recording over this, and hopefully this is helpful for you guys. So this is a gurgler that we're tying, and we're going to keep it in black and purple. I'm starting with a Mustad 3407 DT size 2. Size 2 is what I use for a lot of gurglers, especially for redfish in the slot size. You can up the hook size, or you can down the hook size depending on what you're fishing for. And then the thread that I'm using is 210 ultra thread in purple. So right now I'm just cutting some Pseudo hair, and I don't put anything that's extremely thick on there as far as diameter is concerned. I pretty much cut it the same as I would like a redfish crack or a quan slider or what have you. I mean, there's no nothing unnatural about this, I guess. It's not especially thick, and it's not especially thin. I just kind of keep it the same as I would do a quan slider or a crawler. So now I'm just grabbing a black marker. I'm going to put a little bit of barring on it just to help it stand out a little more, put a little more contrast on it. And you can do 3 bars, you can do 4 bars. I mean, you can do as many as you want, but generally I stick to about 3 or 4 for most any redfish fly that I'm putting barring on. So this is some flash that I haven't ever used before until recently, and I absolutely love it. It's got a bunch of different kind of color variations in it that go with the same theme of the main color. So it's got a little purple in it, it's got a little bit of copper, it's got some black, and this flash is made by Sightcast, and the color is electric purple. And I like it because it gives it a little more, a lot of times when you get flash, it's just gold, or it's just silver, or it's just green. The Sightcast flash has a lot of colors within the same flash that all kind of go together. And then the legs that I'm using are also Sightcast legs. They're called marsh legs, and these are the clear black purple tip legs. And I split them down the middle with thread. There's 2 strands, and so you'll have 2 legs on either side of the hook. And I generally I don't tie them directly on the side of the hook, but just a little bit on top, so they lay on top of that Pseudo hair, not directly on top, but just a little bit off the center line of the hook. And then I'm just cutting them just slightly shorter than the tail of the fly. So this next material I'm going to use is another sight cast material that I've absolutely fallen in love with. This is the holographic wrap, and it's the purple gold color. And the cool thing about this material is you really don't need a ton of it at all. Like I probably cut off too much when I was tying this fly. You really only need about 2 to 3 wraps at most to really get the look that I was looking for, which is just a little bit of flash on the collar, and just to add a little bit more of a accent to the fly and to catch a little bit of light and give it some more liveliness. And this stuff is always a little unwieldy, but once you stroke all those fibers back and wrap your thread back against it, just, you know, ever so slightly, you can kind of get it to lay out and look a little more neat and organized. So now there's really only a couple steps left. That foam that I'm putting in front of the camera is 3mm fly foam, and what I'm saying right here, which is right when the fan turned on, is I usually use a knife, a longer knife, to cut that foam so I can get a perfectly straight line. In this video I just used my scissors. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect by any means. In the diameter of the foam that I'm cutting is really only about maybe 3/4 of an inch to 1/2 inch. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. And then I just take my scissors, and you'll see in the video I just snip off one side and then snip off the other side just to make a little tie-in point right there. So that's what you're gonna lay on top of the fly and start your thread wraps over. And I like to bend that foam just a little bit over the shank of the hook, just to get it down nice and tight. So I'll wrap back over it until I feel like it looks a little more fluid. So I don't want a huge gap between the tail and where the foam starts. So I'll wrap back as far as I can without wrapping on that foam on top of any of those materials, but just as far back as I can to where it just looks like a little more continuous or fluid. So once you got that in a spot where you want it, that the material that I'm holding up right now is EP Woolly Critter brush, and that is the black and purple color. And I'm explaining in the video that I love this material for gurglers, because and shrimp flies and a bunch of other flies. Just because it's the right diameter for a gurgler to the point where you really don't have to trim anything. And it's also got a bunch of these little rubber legs in it, which just, you know, you can't ever have too many rubber legs, in my opinion. It just gives that fly like so much natural movement. And then on these wraps, you really don't have to you don't have to do tight touching wraps. It doesn't have to be right on top of each other. I generally will just, you know, kind of wrap it fairly loosely. And then right when I get to right about halfway to the eye of the hook, I'll wrap back on that woolly critter brush and make sure I have secured it in. And then I'll grab 2 more of those marsh legs in the same color, the clear black purple tip, and I'll tie in 2 strands. So I'll split them around the thread just like I did in the back. The only difference when tying these in is I do tie them on the either side of the hook. Instead of more slightly on top, I'll tie them completely on the side, just because I want those to kind of fly out on either side of the fly. And then I'll cut these shorter than I did the flies in the back as well. So I'll cut them right above that clear and black, and just so there's a little bit of a purple tip. So once you're done with those that second pair of legs, you just go back to palmering on your brush, and then really only one more step after this. And I do put a weed guard on in this one, so if you want to stay and watch that, you can. But once you get the foam over the top of the hook, the fly is really complete, as long as you don't want a weed guard. Now just folding over that foam, you can kind of feel it out where you want to fold it in at. You can push that foam back further if you want, you can pull it forward if you want, but really you just want it to go back little slightly, have a bend in that foam towards the tail, and it should gurgle just fine as long as you tie that in right on the eye of the hook. And what you'll see me do, so it's obviously the foam is laying completely flat right now, so if you were to throw it and try and get it to gurgle, it wouldn't really gurgle that well. So what you do is you lift up that front flap, and then you just do a bunch of thread wraps underneath that foam to help support that front piece of foam to stick up, so when you're stripping the fly, it makes that action that we're looking for, that gurgle. And then you can cut it wherever you want it. I generally, give it about, I don't know, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch in the front. And really that's the completed fly. I'll put some UV glue on it, and I'll put it on top as well as on the bottom, and you'll see me add in a weed guard here. What the weed guard that I like to use, or the mono that I like to use, is Mason's Hard Mono 30 pound. And for this one, I just did a really simple weed guard. It's just a single post. I'll flatten that one end with some pliers just to put some grooves in the line, and helps keep that mono to stay in place. And then I'll do some wraps right over the top that I flattened, and then I'll also do some wraps behind that mono just to really lock it in place. And then right there, the wraps that I'm doing are behind that mono and then underneath that front foam, just because that foam was starting to want to lay down a little flat. So in order to fix that, I'm just putting some more thread wraps underneath that front flap of foam, as well as on the back side of the weed guard, just to help secure it a little bit more. So with the UV glue, I used to have one that had a little metal tip on the end that helped kind of get your glue in there a little better in tighter spots. I don't have that right now, so I just put some, I was kind of careful, just put some dabs of it on top of the thread, on top of the fly, and then on the bottom as well, and then just using my bodkin to kind of spread it out and make sure I got some behind the weed guard, in front of the weed guard, on my thread wraps, and just trying to keep it out of the eye of the hook as best as possible. And then really all you do is just hit it with the UV light. One thing I will say is, a lot of times if you're using UV glue and you have a weed guard on there, a lot of times right when you start zapping it with the light, your weed guard will want to move. So if you hold it right where you want it and then zap it, it'll stay in the spot that you want it to stay in. So I've had weed guards that I was hitting it with the light and they bent all the way back almost to the hook. So just keep that in mind when you're doing it. And I mean, even if you glue them in and they bend back towards the hook, you can usually bend them out, but it does tend to like want to crack the the UV glue a little bit. So just keep that in mind. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully next time I won't have to do an audio recording over it. And that's it. Enjoy.